Welcome back to the channel, coin collectors and treasure hunters. Today, we're uncovering two of the rarest and most valuable United States Washington quarter dollar coins that could be hiding in everyday pocket change. One of these coins might be worth far more than its face value, so stay with us until the end. You won't want to miss these incredible discoveries. Frist Coin United States Kennedy half-dollar coin minted in 1971. At first glance, it can look like nothing more than a large, familiar piece of American pocket change. But this particular year marks an important chapter in the Kennedy half-dollar story. By 1971, the coin had already moved beyond the 90% silver era that defined its earliest years, and the U.S. Mint was producing Kennedy halves with a copper-nickel clad composition over a copper core. That change is one of the first clues that makes a 1971 example worth examining closely, because the surface, edge, weight, and overall appearance can reveal whether you are looking at an ordinary survivor or something much more unusual. The Kennedy half-dollar itself carries an emotional history that few modern American coins can match. Its obverse features John F. Kennedy facing left, with the familiar inscriptions Liberty and In God We Trust surrounding his portrait, while the reverse presents the presidential seal with an eagle surrounded by stars. Every detail was designed to make the coin unmistakably American, but the 1971 issue arrived during a period when Kennedy halves were becoming less common in everyday transactions. Their large size made them distinctive, yet changing habits in American commerce gradually pushed the denomination away from regular circulation, allowing many examples to spend decades sitting unnoticed in collections, drawers, jars, and inherited coin boxes. What makes a 1971 Kennedy half-dollar fascinating is not simply its age, because age alone does not automatically create rarity. Millions of coins can survive from a particular year, and an ordinary circulated example may remain worth little more than its face value. The real intrigue begins when condition, variety, minting characteristics, or an authentic error separates one coin from another. A sharp strike with clean fields, strong lettering, undisturbed surfaces, and attractive luster can immediately make an example more desirable, especially when compared with heavily circulated pieces showing scratches, dullness, rim damage, or contact marks. Now imagine holding one under a bright light and slowly turning it from side to side. The fields around Kennedy's portrait can reveal tiny marks that disappear at first glance, while the high points of the design can show exactly how much wear the coin has experienced. On the reverse, the eagle's feathers, shield, stars, and lettering deserve the same attention. A coin with unusually crisp details and original-looking surfaces can create a completely different impression from a heavily worn example, and this is where collectors begin separating simple age from genuine condition rarity. The goal is not to assume that every shiny 1971 half-dollar is valuable, but to discover what makes a particular specimen different. The edge deserves special attention because it can sometimes tell a story that the faces cannot. A normal 1971 clad Kennedy half should show the characteristic layered appearance associated with its composition, and the edge should be examined for unusual color, separation, damage, or irregularity. Weight can also provide an important clue, because a genuine composition and a possible wrong planchet or other mint-related anomaly may produce measurable differences. But a strange weight does not automatically mean a valuable error. Dirt, damage, altered surfaces, scales of questionable accuracy, or post-mint modifications can create misleading results. For that reason, any dramatic weight discrepancy should be treated as a reason for further investigation rather than instant excitement. Then there is strike alignment, an area that can turn an ordinary inspection into a much more serious search. Hold the coin carefully and compare the orientation of the obverse and reverse designs, watching for anything dramatically different from normal alignment. Examine the rim as well, looking for unusual thickness, weakness, flattening, or other characteristics that appear consistent with a minting problem rather than damage caused after the coin left the mint. The distinction is critical. A spectacular-looking mistake can be fascinating, but a collector wants evidence that the anomaly occurred during production, not decades later in someone's pocket, toolbox, or experiment. Letter doubling is another detail that can ignite curiosity, especially around the date, Liberty, in God we trust, and other lettering. Under magnification, genuine die doubling can produce a distinct secondary image or spread that follows the contours of the design, while ordinary machine doubling can create a flatter, shelf-like appearance. Damage and polishing can also imitate doubling. That is why the smartest approach is patient comparison rather than immediately declaring a rare variety. If the doubling appears unusual, photograph it, compare it with trusted references, and consider professional examination before assigning a rarity label or value. And this is where the value story becomes especially interesting. Suppose a 1971 Kennedy half-dollar has a minor but legitimate variation that attracts specialized collectors. An illustrative market outcome might fall somewhere around $2,500 to $3,500, depending entirely on authentication, condition, rarity, and demand. Move up the ladder to a more notable and convincingly documented example, and an illustrative outcome could reach around $9,000. These numbers are not promises, fixed price tags, or predictions for every 1971 half-dollar. They are storytelling examples of how dramatically the market can change when a coin possesses a combination of rarity, preservation, provenance, and collector demand. At another level of the ladder, imagine a high-grade example that survives with exceptional surfaces and powerful eye appeal. An illustrative figure of around $5,000 could represent the kind of outcome collectors might dream about. An unusual mint anomaly could push the hypothetical story towards $6,000, while a rare collector piece might reach an illustrative $7,500. An exceptionally preserved or genuinely uncommon example could be imagined around $8,000, while an unusual discovery backed by strong collector demand might climb toward $8,500. In the most extraordinary scenario, a historically significant or exceptionally rare authenticated specimen could approach $9,000 in this illustrative ladder. But actual prices can be dramatically different depending on the specific coin and the marketplace. Those numbers can sound almost unbelievable when you remember that the coin began with a face value of just 50 cents. For someone discovering an extraordinary example in an old family collection, the emotional impact could feel like finding a sudden windfall or discovering money that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. At the very top of a hypothetical outcome, the proceeds could even resemble a meaningful down payment on a home. But that emotional possibility is precisely why caution matters. The coin collecting world rewards evidence, not excitement, and a dramatic claim without authentication can turn an exciting discovery into an expensive misunderstanding. If you find a 1971 Kennedy half-dollar that appears unusual, resist the temptation to clean it, polish it, scrape the edge, or attempt to improve its appearance. Record its weight with a reliable scale, inspect the metal color under neutral lighting, examine the rim from multiple angles, check strike alignment, and use magnification to study suspicious doubling or other abnormalities. Compare the coin against trustworthy references, and when the evidence suggests something genuinely unusual, seek an experienced numismatist or professional grading and authentication service. A certified opinion can be far more valuable than a confident guess, particularly when substantial money is potentially involved. And that is what makes the 1971 Kennedy half-dollar so compelling. The possibility is not found simply in the date printed on the coin, but in the tiny details surrounding it. Most examples will not become $5,000 discoveries, and many will remain ordinary pieces of American numismatic history. Yet somewhere among old collections, forgotten jars, inherited boxes, and coins passed from one generation to another, an unusual specimen could still be waiting for someone patient enough to notice what everyone else overlooked. The next time you see that familiar Kennedy portrait, take a second look, because the coin you almost ignored could hold a story far bigger than 50 cents, and the next shocking coin may be hiding somewhere even more unexpected. Second, coins. United States 1972 Kennedy half-dollar carries the face of a turbulent era in American history. A large, silver-colored coin created just a few years after the nation had witnessed the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, and the emotional transformation of his image into one of the most recognizable designs in American coinage. At first glance, it may look like an ordinary 50-cent piece, but its broad surface, distinctive portrait, and bold presidential profile give it a presence that smaller circulating coins simply cannot match. The obverse shows Kennedy facing left, with the inscriptions Liberty and In God We Trust surrounding his portrait, while the reverse presents the presidential seal with an eagle, shield, arrows, olive branch, and a ring of stars. Yet the real intrigue begins when you stop treating the coin as pocket change and start examining it as a physical record of the United States Mint during the early 1970s. The 1972 issue belongs to a fascinating transitional period for the Kennedy half-dollar, because the coin was no longer the 90% silver circulating piece that collectors associate with the earliest Kennedy halves. By this time, the standard composition for circulation was copper-nickel clad over a copper core, giving the coin its familiar bright outer appearance while revealing a different color along the edge when closely inspected. That change matters because the edge can tell you something important before you ever reach for magnification. A normal clad example should show the characteristic copper-colored core line, whereas an unusual appearance might prompt questions about composition, damage, or an altered surface. The 1972 Kennedy half-dollar therefore sits at an interesting crossroads between historical memory, changing metallurgy, and modern mass production. There is another reason this date can become exciting for collectors. The Philadelphia, Denver, and proof issues created different collecting paths, and the mint mark can immediately change the story behind the piece. A 1972 D carries the D mint mark associated with the Denver Mint, while Philadelphia circulation pieces traditionally lack a mint mark. Proof versions were produced at San Francisco and can display the distinctive mirrored fields and specially prepared surfaces expected from proof coinage. This means that two coins carrying the same date can have dramatically different appearances and collector appeal. Before judging value, a careful collector should identify exactly what version is in hand, because a date alone is never enough to establish rarity. Now look closer at Kennedy's portrait and the surrounding lettering, because this is where ordinary wear can begin to disguise what the coin actually looks like. On a circulated example, the highest points of the hair, cheek, jaw, and lettering may soften from years of contact, while an exceptionally preserved piece can retain sharper details and stronger surface brilliance. Turn the coin beneath a single light source and watch how the luster moves across the fields. Original mint luster tends to flow naturally, while harsh cleaning can create unnatural brightness, hairlines, or a flat appearance that may reduce collector appeal. A coin that looks dramatically shiny is not automatically valuable. Sometimes the most desirable surfaces are the ones that still preserve their original character. The edge deserves just as much attention. Because the 1972 circulation half-dollar uses a clad construction, the rim and edge can reveal whether the coin appears consistent with its intended manufacture. Look for a clean, continuous rim rather than assuming every irregularity is a mint error. A flattened section could come from circulation damage, while a strange-looking edge might result from environmental exposure, a vice, or other postman abuse. True mint-made abnormalities are different because they originate during the manufacturing process and often leave physical evidence that can be studied under magnification. This distinction is crucial. The difference between an interesting damaged coin and a legitimate mint error can mean the difference between a curiosity and a serious numismatic discovery. Then there are the details collectors love to hunt for: possible doubling, unusual strikes, missing or distorted design elements, off-center impressions, clipped planchets, die-related abnormalities, and other manufacturing anomalies. On the 1972 Kennedy half dollar, however, the presence of something that merely looks doubled does not automatically prove a valuable doubled die. Machine doubling, die deterioration, strike movement, and photographic distortion can all create misleading shapes around letters and numbers. Examine the date, Liberty, In God We Trust, and other lettering from multiple angles, preferably under magnification. Genuine doubled design elements should display characteristics consistent with a doubled die, rather than simply appearing wider or flatter from mechanical striking effects. Weight can provide another useful clue, but it must be interpreted carefully rather than treated like a magic number. A collector can place the coin on a properly calibrated digital scale and compare the result with the expected specifications for the particular 1972 issue. A significant difference may justify further investigation, especially when combined with an unusual edge or appearance, but scale readings can also be affected by dirt, damaged rims, inaccurate equipment, or other factors. Metal color deserves the same caution. A strangely golden, unusually pale, or copper-heavy appearance might seem dramatic, but discoloration, chemical exposure, polishing, plating, or environmental effects can imitate genuine composition abnormalities. The responsible approach is to document the evidence without damaging the coin. Strike alignment is another fascinating checkpoint. Hold the coin by its edges and rotate it carefully to see how the obverse and reverse orientations relate to one another. A minor visual difference does not necessarily mean a major mint error, because production tolerances exist and many apparent abnormalities are simply misinterpretations. The rim should also be examined for consistency, since an uneven or strangely shaped border can sometimes point toward a genuine striking problem, but it can just as easily indicate damage after the coin left the mint. This is why collectors learn to slow down when something looks extraordinary. The more exciting the discovery seems, the more important it becomes to separate evidence from wishful thinking. And this is where the value story takes an unexpected turn, because a normal circulated 1972 Kennedy half dollar is generally not transformed into a fortune simply because it has an old date. Condition, mint, variety, authenticity, and especially the presence of a legitimate and desirable error can completely change the equation. Imagine finding a coin in an old collection and discovering a minor but verified variation that attracts specialized interest. In an illustrative market scenario, a particularly desirable example might enter a $2,500 to $3,500 conversation. A more notable authenticated variety could be discussed around $9,000 in an exceptional hypothetical outcome. These figures are storytelling examples, not guarantees or standard prices, and actual market results depend heavily on the exact coin, certification, grade, rarity, provenance, and buyer demand. Climb higher on that storytelling ladder, and the numbers become even more dramatic, but so does the burden of proof. A truly high-grade example could be imagined around $5,000 in an illustrative scenario, while an unusual and properly documented mint anomaly might reach a hypothetical $6,000 level. A rare collector piece could be imagined around $7,500, and an exceptionally preserved or genuinely uncommon example might approach $8,000 in a strong market. An unusual discovery with powerful collector demand could be framed around $8,500, while an extraordinary or historically significant example might climb toward $9,000. Again, these are illustrative possibilities rather than guaranteed valuations, because real coins do not follow a fixed price ladder simply because someone assigns a number to them. Think about what those numbers would actually mean in everyday life. A legitimate discovery at several $1,000s could feel like a sudden windfall, potentially resembling a meaningful down payment on a home or a financial surprise that completely changes someone's month or even year. But the emotional power of the story is not really the dollar amount. It is the possibility that something overlooked for decades could suddenly become important because one tiny detail was missed by everyone else. That is what makes coin collecting so addictive. The thrill comes from the moment when an ordinary object stops being ordinary, when the familiar portrait of Kennedy suddenly seems to contain a mystery, and when careful observation reveals a possibility worth investigating. Before anyone starts imagining a fortune, though responsible examination must come first. Photograph both sides under neutral lighting, record the coin's weight, inspect its edge, compare its color and surfaces with known examples, and study the lettering for credible doubling rather than relying on a blurry photograph or an online claim. Never clean, scrape, bend, chemically test, or otherwise alter a potentially valuable coin. If the evidence continues to suggest something unusual, professional authentication is the safest next step, particularly from a recognized grading or authentication service. A genuine mint error or rare variety needs more than excitement. It needs verification that can withstand expert scrutiny and a collector market that knows exactly what it is looking at. So the next time a 1972 Kennedy half-dollar appears in an old box, inherited collection, drawer, or forgotten group of coins, do not rush past it simply because the date looks common. Look at the portrait, study the lettering, inspect the rim, check the edge, consider the weight, observe the metal color, and examine the strike alignment before deciding what you have. Most examples will remain fascinating pieces of American numismatic history rather than life-changing treasures, but every careful examination keeps open the possibility of something genuinely unusual. And that is the cliffhanger hiding inside this broad 50-cent coin. Somewhere, perhaps in an everyday place where nobody thought to look twice, a tiny minting detail could be waiting to rewrite the story. So keep your eyes open, because the next coin may be even more shocking than this one.